5 a.m. in the morning. I'm feeling pumped, ready to go to the gym. And taking advantage of the sort of emptier streets in the morning, I thought that I would make a video explaining manual mode. So let's do it. Let's begin by saying that the three most important camera settings to master in manual mode are shutter speed, ISO and aperture. These three settings work together as a team to set the correct exposure of your photo. But the tricky part is that except from setting the exposure, they all have different side effects on your photo. Today I'm going to talk more about aperture, whose measuring system is also a bit more confusing and difficult than the other two. Or let's say at least not as straightforward. First of all, what is aperture? It is nothing but a hole through which light passes to an optical or photographic instrument. As an example, see how the blades of the diaphragm move in real time to open and close the aperture of this lens. Now the way you open the aperture is by lowering the f-stops. F-stops or f-number is how the aperture is measured, and that's also where the confusion begins, because a lower f-number means a larger aperture which lets more light in. So if you want to increase the exposure in your photo, you have to lower the f-number. But why is it like that? Well, the reason is because the aperture is not measured by the diameter, so that would be very easy to understand, and the larger the diameter would get, the more light would come in. But the way the f-stop is calculated is actually as a fraction. So the f-stop is equal to the focal length of your lens divided by the diameter. So the diameter is actually under here, and the focal length is measured in millimeters, and the lenses are named after it. But it's not actually the size of the lens, the physical size. It is the distance from the point where the light rays that come from outside are bundled in the optical axis, the distance from that point to the sensor. That is called the focal length. Now, to understand it a bit better, when the focal length is like further away from the sensor, then this angle that projects the light coming from an object to the sensor is actually narrower, and this is called the telephoto. And on the other hand, when the distance of these nodal points to the sensor is shorter, so when the focal length is shorter, then the angle of the light that comes from outside is wider, and the objects appear smaller in the sensor. These are called wide-angle lenses. Now, to come back to the formula, if we take the focal length as something like unchanged, because when we are changing the aperture we're not changing the focal length as well, only the diameter is affected. Since this is the unit that we measure the aperture with, if we change the diameter here and make it larger, so if we increase the aperture and let more light in, and this stays unchanged, the f-stop number becomes smaller. The reason for that is that if you are dividing that number by a larger number now, that will of course give you a smaller number in return. And that is again why the lower f-stop numbers mean the larger aperture. I hope that is clear by now. The side effect, so to say, or is more like the secondary function of aperture, is the depth of field. So the more you increase the f number, the more depth you have in your photos, which means that more of the field that is in the photo is in focus. And the other way around, the more you lower the f number, the shallower the depth of field, which means that only one subject is in focus and the rest of the picture is blurred out. I use this bench because my tripod is too low, so I put my tripod in here and I need to take it back to its place now. Job done. now that I got the blood flowing, it's time to begin the day. I'll see you in the next one.